The foods that will actually save you during a crisis are probably the ones you've been walking right past every single week without a second thought. Everyone has heard the same prepper advice. Stock rice, stock beans, grab canned vegetables and maybe some freeze-dried packets. And look, none of that is wrong. Those items have a place in any solid food plan. But here's the uncomfortable reality that almost nobody in the survival space wants to say out loud. Those exact foods, the ones every list pushes, are the first ones to completely disappear when things get disrupted. Not gradually. Not over a week. Within hours of a real crisis hitting, those aisles go empty. Shelves stripped. Panic buying clears them faster than stores can restock. I've watched this happen in real time. I saw it unfold in 2020 in ways that stunned even people who considered themselves prepared. I've seen it happen ahead of hurricanes, during brutal ice storms, and in those quieter, lower-profile supply chain disruptions that don't even trend on social media but still leave entire sections of grocery stores barren for days at a stretch. The pattern is always the same. The obvious foods vanish, the unfamiliar ones stay. And that's the insight that changes everything. The foods that remain on shelves during and after a panic-buying event are almost always the same foods the mainstream preparedness community overlooks entirely. Foods that most households have never bought. Foods sitting on aisles that get walked past without a glance. And here's what makes this even more worth paying attention to. Many of these ignored foods are cheaper than the standard prepper list, more nutritious per dollar, and far more versatile in the kitchen. They just don't get talked about because they're not dramatic or exotic enough to fill a YouTube thumbnail. Today that changes. We're going through 11 of these foods one by one, not specialty survival products you have to order online. Not anything from a military surplus catalog. These are items sitting at your local grocery store right now. Some of them cost less than $2. At least one costs under $1 and lasts essentially forever. And once you see how they all connect with each other, how they form a system rather than just a list, the way you look at a grocery store will genuinely shift. Let's start with the first one. Ghee. If that word is unfamiliar, here's what it is. Ghee is clarified butter. The process is simple. Regular butter gets heated slowly until the water cooks off and the milk solids float to the top and get strained away. What remains is pure butterfat. Golden, rich, and absolutely stable at room temperature. It's been a cornerstone ingredient in South Asian and Middle Eastern cooking for thousands of years, and somehow the Western preparedness world almost entirely ignores it. That is a significant oversight. Here's why it matters so much for food storage specifically. Fat is the most calorie-dense macronutrient that exists. A single tablespoon of ghee contains roughly 120 calories. In any extended disruption, your body burns through energy faster than usual. Stress does that. Physical work does that. Cold does that when heat is unavailable. Calories become more important, not less in those scenarios. And having a dense, reliable, long-lasting source of cooking fat is not optional. It's foundational. Most food storage plans barely address this. What sets ghee apart from butter or standard vegetable oils is its exceptional shelf stability. Regular butter without refrigeration spoils within weeks. Most vegetable oils, even stored carefully, start breaking down within 1 to 2 years because their polyunsaturated fats oxidize over time. Ghee sidesteps that problem entirely. With the moisture and milk solids removed, it can sit in a sealed jar at room temperature for years without any degradation in quality. Some traditional preparations in India are intentionally aged and stored for decades. That kind of natural longevity is almost impossible to find in any other cooking fat. Beyond storage, ghee actually performs better in the kitchen than most alternatives. Its smoke point sits around 480 degrees Fahrenheit, meaning you can fry, sauté, and roast at high heat without the fat burning and turning bitter. It brings a subtle, nutty warmth to food that transforms even the most basic dishes. A scoop of ghee stirred into plain rice makes it taste like something worth eating. Lentils finished with a spoonful of it become genuinely satisfying rather than something you're merely getting through. That gap between food you enjoy and food you endure becomes critically important after the 3rd or 4th day of eating from a limited pantry. This is a thread that runs through this entire list, and it's worth naming directly. Morale is not separate from survival. It's part of it. You can find ghee at most major grocery stores. Check the international aisle or near the cooking oils. A jar typically runs between $6 and $10, and because you use it 1 tablespoon at a time, a single jar goes a long way. 2 or 3 jars resolve your cooking fat problem for months. take up almost no shelf space, and will still be sitting on grocery store shelves after every can of beans in the building is long gone. The second food is dried lentils. And I want to be precise here because most preparedness resources just say stock beans and leave it there. Dried lentils are different from beans in ways that matter practically, especially in a disruption scenario. The single biggest difference is cook time. Beans need to soak overnight and then simmer for an hour or more before they're edible. Lentils need neither. Rinse them, add them to water, and in 20 to 25 minutes, you have a complete, cooked, highly nutritious meal component. When you're conserving fuel, cooking on a camp stove, or simply feeding hungry people as quickly as possible, that time difference is not a small thing. It's operationally significant. Nutritionally, lentils are extraordinary for their price. 1 cup of cooked lentils delivers around 18 grams of protein and 16 grams of fiber alongside meaningful amounts of iron, folate, and potassium. Combine them with rice and you get a complete protein, meaning all 9 essential amino acids in one meal. That pairing has sustained entire civilizations across South Asia, the Middle East, and North Africa for thousands of years. Not because it was the only food available, but because it works. Foundationally, reliably, economically. Properly stored, dried lentils last 25 years or more. A standard 1-pound bag at a regular grocery store costs somewhere between $1.50 and $2. Buy from an Indian or Middle Eastern market in bulk, and you can often bring that cost down below $1 per pound. And they come in varieties that actually produce different meals. Red lentils break down when cooked into a thick, creamy texture ideal for soups and thick stews. Green and brown lentils hold their shape and work well in heartier preparations. French lentils have a peppery bite and firmer consistency. Having 2 or 3 types in storage means the meals you make from them genuinely feel different, which is more important than most people expect. There's a term in preparedness circles for what happens when people eat the same food repeatedly over days. Menu fatigue. It sounds manageable in theory. In practice, it erodes morale faster than almost any other factor in a prolonged disruption, especially in households with children. This is why variety within a limited pantry matters so much, and why lentils in multiple varieties earn their place so decisively. Here's what a real meal looks like built from these 2 items alone. Red lentils cooked with water and a bouillon cube until they break down into a thick, savory base. A spoonful of ghee stirred in at the end. Dried cumin, turmeric, or even just black pepper added if you have them. Served over rice or alongside simple flatbread. That is a nutritionally complete, genuinely good-tasting meal assembled entirely from shelf-stable ingredients that cost pennies per serving. This is what practical preparedness eating actually looks like. And it doesn't taste like survival food. It tastes like dinner. The third food on this list is the one that will probably surprise you most. And that surprise is exactly why it works strategically. Whole popcorn kernels. Before you dismiss that, hear it through. Whole popcorn kernels stored in a sealed container last indefinitely. The kernels are living seeds with low moisture content, and as long as that moisture stays intact, they pop reliably for years. But shelf life is actually the second most important reason popcorn earns a spot here. The first is what it does for morale. Popcorn is familiar comfort food. Adults want it, children love it. In a stressful, difficult situation where everything feels unfamiliar and heavy, producing a bowl of popcorn does something that a nutritionally superior but unfamiliar food simply cannot do. It reminds people of normal life. That psychological function is genuinely valuable, and it is completely underappreciated in standard preparedness advice. There's also a second function that most people miss. The whole kernel can be ground into cornmeal. That gives you the ability to make porridge, flatbreads, polenta, and thickening agents for soups and stews. So one single item gives you popped snack food and a versatile baking and cooking ingredient. The 2 functions don't compete, they complement each other, which is exactly the kind of efficiency you want in a storage pantry with finite space. A 2-pound bag costs around $3 to $4. It's worth keeping several on hand. The fourth food is potato flakes, also called instant mashed potatoes. The store brand variety, not the premium flavored packets, just the plain flakes. Here's the nutritional case first. Potatoes are a remarkably complete food. A single potato contains meaningful amounts of vitamin C, potassium, vitamin B6, and fiber. Dehydrated into flakes, they retain most of that nutrition and gain an extraordinary shelf life, 5 to 10 years under proper storage conditions. And because they're already fully cooked and dehydrated, All you need is hot water. 30 seconds and you have food. No fuel-intensive cooking required. Beyond the direct use as mashed potatoes, flakes are a versatile ingredient. Mix them into bread dough for a softer, denser texture. Use them to thicken soups and stews. Form them into simple potato cakes with a little oil. Combine them with powdered egg and a pinch of seasoning for a filling, protein-adjacent patty that doesn't require refrigeration or any special equipment to prepare. A large container costs around $5 to $7 and contains a significant number of servings. In terms of calories per dollar and calories per square foot of storage space, potato flakes are difficult to beat, and crucially, they stay on shelves during disruptions. Most people reach for the obviously familiar foods first. Potato flakes don't make that mental shortlist for most shoppers, which means they're available when other things aren't. The fifth food is bouillon cubes and concentrated broth paste. This might seem like a minor pantry item. It is not minor. What bouillon does is solve one of the most persistent problems in emergency cooking, which is that food made only from shelf-stable ingredients often lacks depth. It tastes thin, flat, like something you're eating because you have to rather than because you want to. A single bouillon cube dissolved in cooking water changes that entirely. Cook your rice in bouillon water instead of plain water, and the entire dish transforms. Simmer lentils in a seasoned broth, and they develop complexity that makes them satisfying instead of merely filling. Dissolve a bouillon cube into a pot of otherwise plain potato flakes, and you have something that tastes like it was intentional. The flavor elevation is disproportionate to the cost. Bouillon cubes last 2 years or longer in standard storage conditions. A box of 24 costs around $3 to $4. Broth paste in a small jar lasts up to a year after opening and delivers even more concentrated flavor. At roughly 15 cents per serving of dramatically improved food, bouillon is arguably the highest return per dollar item in this entire list. Stock it heavily. The sixth food is wheat berries. Not flour. Not already processed wheat products. The whole kernel. Here's why the distinction matters. Whole wheat berries last 25 to 30 years in sealed storage. Whole wheat flour, by contrast, goes rancid within 6 to 12 months, because once the kernel is broken open and the oils inside are exposed to air, oxidation begins immediately. So if you want wheat-based nutrition in long-term storage, storing the whole berry and grinding it yourself when you need it is objectively the more durable approach. Wheat berries can be cooked whole and eaten like rice or barley, with a pleasantly chewy texture that works well in salads, grain bowls, or as a side dish. They can be sprouted, which dramatically increases their nutritional density and requires nothing but a jar and water. And if you have a hand-cranked grain mill, you can grind them into fresh flour and bake bread, tortillas, or simple flatbreads. That capability, the ability to produce fresh baked goods from a long-term grain store, is one of the most significant practical skills and provisions a prepared household can have. Wheat berries typically run about $1 to $2 per pound at natural food stores or bought in bulk. 5 pounds stored in a sealed airtight container provides a meaningful base for dozens of meals. The cooking time is longer than lentils, around 45 to 60 minutes, but the result is deeply satisfying in a way that lighter grains sometimes aren't. And unlike pasta or flour, wheat berries sitting quietly in a bucket will still be perfectly good 20 years from now. The seventh food is sardines. This one gets a strong reaction from a lot of people. The smell, the texture, the unfamiliarity for households that didn't grow up with them, and I understand that. But set the reaction aside for a moment and look at the numbers. A single can of sardines in olive oil contains around 190 calories, 23 grams of complete protein, and a substantial dose of omega-3 fatty acids, calcium, vitamin D, and B12. All of that for around $1 to $1.50 a can. Try to find any other protein source that matches that nutritional profile at that price point. It doesn't exist. Sardines are packed in their own oil, which means they come with an additional source of calories and cooking fat. The oil from the can can be used to sauté vegetables, dress grains, or add richness to an otherwise plain dish. Shelf life runs 3 to 5 years easily, and many people report sardines staying perfectly good beyond that. They're small, stackable, require no cooking, and can be eaten straight from the can with nothing but a fork if you need to. In a scenario where fuel is limited or absent, that matters enormously. The resistance to sardines is mostly psychological, and it fades quickly when nothing else is available, and a can of sardines becomes exactly what you need. Stock 2 to 3 dozen cans. Buy them on sale. The dollar per gram of protein ratio is almost unbeatable in the shelf-stable category. The eighth food is powdered whole eggs. This is distinct from freeze-dried egg products, which tend to be expensive and often found only in specialty survival stores. Powdered whole eggs are available at most warehouse stores, natural food retailers, and online with no specialty sourcing required. A full egg, dehydrated into powder, retains all of the original nutrition. The protein, the fat, the vitamins. Reconstituted with water, it produces something that cooks like a fresh egg in most applications. Scrambled eggs from powder are not identical to fresh scrambled eggs, but they're genuine eggs, and in a situation where fresh eggs aren't available, they fill a role nothing else does quite as well. Mix powdered egg into pancake batter, bread dough, pasta dough, or soup-thickening bases. The cooking versatility is broad. Shelf life for properly stored powdered whole eggs runs 5 to 10 years, and even longer in oxygen-depleted containers. A pound of powder is equivalent to roughly a dozen to 15 whole eggs, and costs around $10 to $15. That works out to less than $1 per equivalent egg, which is not dramatically different from fresh egg pricing at many grocery stores, but with a shelf life measured in years rather than weeks. In terms of protein sourcing for long-term food storage, powdered eggs earn a position near the top of the list. The ninth food on this list is peanut butter powder, and this requires a brief explanation for why it appears here instead of regular jarred peanut butter, which is the more intuitive choice for most people. Regular peanut butter is excellent, calorie-dense, high in protein, familiar, widely available. The problem is shelf life. Even unopened, jarred peanut butter begins degrading within 1 to 2 years because the oils inside oxidize. It goes stale, then rancid. In a long-term food storage context, that's a meaningful limitation. Peanut butter powder solves that problem by removing the oil during manufacturing through a pressing process. The fat content drops dramatically, and with the fat removed, the primary mechanism of spoilage disappears. Shelf life extends to 4 to 5 years, and often longer in sealed containers. The powder is also lighter and more compact than jarred peanut butter, which matters in situations where storage space is at a premium. The real strength of peanut butter powder is its function as an ingredient rather than just a spread. Stir it into oatmeal for a protein boost that makes breakfast hold significantly longer. Mix it with soy sauce, a splash of vinegar, and water for a quick peanut sauce over rice or noodles. Fold it into bread dough for added richness. Blend it into a trail mix base. It brings flavor depth and protein density to a range of dishes in a way that's hard to replicate with anything else in a typical storage pantry. Think of it as a flavor and nutrition multiplier. On its own, it's useful. Combined with other items on this list, it elevates the whole system. A box runs $5 to $8 and delivers a significant number of servings relative to its compact size. The 10th food requires a slight shift in how most preparedness discussions frame necessity. That shift is intentional and worth making clearly. Dark chocolate belongs in your food storage, not as a luxury, not as an afterthought, as a deliberate, considered inclusion. Human beings are not machines processing macronutrients. We need small moments of comfort. We need something that makes a difficult day a little more endurable, and a long, uncertain night a bit shorter. Dark chocolate does that, and it does it while delivering meaningful actual nutrition. Chocolate at 70% cacao or higher contains real amounts of iron, magnesium, copper, and antioxidants. A single standard bar carries 500 to 600 calories. The higher the cacao percentage, the lower the sugar and dairy content, which extends shelf life. Stored in a consistently cool location, dark chocolate at 70% or above lasts 12 months or longer at room temperature, and significantly longer with more careful storage conditions.
Beyond personal morale, dark chocolate has functioned as informal currency in virtually every sustained disruption throughout modern history. Wartime rationing, the Great Depression, extended natural disasters. Coffee, tobacco, and chocolate have all traded at values far exceeding their original cost because people trade for comfort. That's not a cynical observation. It's simply human nature in high-stress situations. A square of real chocolate, offered to someone who has been eating rice and beans for 2 weeks, has a perceived value that vastly exceeds what you paid for it. Having a few items like that set aside is quietly strategic. Preparedness isn't only about surviving a crisis in the minimum physical sense. It's about maintaining enough quality of life through one that you remain capable of thinking clearly, making good decisions, and treating the people around you with patience and care. Dark chocolate is inexpensive. Stock it accordingly. The 11th food is the one that ties the most threads of this list together. vinegar. And not just one type. White vinegar, apple cider vinegar, and at least one specialty variety, such as rice vinegar or red wine vinegar. Vinegar lasts indefinitely. Not approximately. Not with proper storage caveats. Indefinitely. The acetic acid concentration prevents any microbial growth, meaning vinegar does not spoil. A bottle you purchase today will be chemically identical in 20 years. That is an almost unique property among food products, and it earns vinegar a foundational role in any serious long-term pantry. But the real case for vinegar is what it does for everything around it. White vinegar cleans and disinfects surfaces without synthetic chemicals. It pickles and preserves fresh produce from a garden or market, dramatically extending the usable life of vegetables that would otherwise spoil in days. A pickling jar requires nothing but vinegar, salt, water, and whatever vegetables you have. The result keeps for months without refrigeration. Apple cider vinegar serves as a base for salad dressings, marinades, and simple table sauces that can transform the experience of eating a very plain meal. A quick dressing of apple cider vinegar, a spoonful of ghee, dried herbs, and salt turns a bowl of lentils or wheat berries into something with genuine character. Vinegar also tenderizes tough cuts of meat and helps legumes soften more quickly during cooking. It has applications in basic first aid. It removes mineral deposits from cookware. The flavor dimension vinegar adds to simple food is difficult to overstate. Pickled vegetables served alongside rice and lentils make the plate feel like a considered, intentional meal rather than emergency rations. And in a prolonged situation, that distinction is not trivial. The difference between meals people endure and meals people look forward to is the difference between a household that holds together and one that begins to fracture under strain. A gallon of white vinegar costs $3 to $4. Apple cider vinegar runs a little more. For under $15 total, you have a multi-year supply of one of the most useful substances in any kitchen. And vinegar, including the specialty varieties, stays on grocery store shelves long after more obvious items have been cleared out, because most people simply don't consider it essential, which is exactly what makes it worth having in abundance. So here is the complete picture. 11 foods, every one of them available at a regular grocery store, most of them under $5, all of them likely to still be on the shelf after the rice and canned goods have been stripped bare. Look at how they operate as a system rather than just a list. Ghee provides cooking fat and richness. Lentils and wheat berries provide protein and long-term caloric foundation. Popcorn kernels and potato flakes provide versatile, comforting carbohydrates that cover both direct eating and cooking applications. Bullion, vinegar, and peanut butter powder are the flavor and function multipliers that turn plain ingredients into meals people actually want to eat. Sardines and powdered eggs cover the high-quality protein gaps that plant foods alone can't fully close. And dark chocolate covers the thing nobody plans for, but everybody needs. A small, daily reason to feel like things are going to be okay. The most effective food storage plan isn't about finding the most expensive freeze-dried kit or filling an entire basement with buckets. It's about building something practical, something built from foods you understand, foods you'll actually rotate and use, foods that work together to produce a wide variety of real meals from a finite pantry. And here's the point that gets lost in a lot of preparedness content. You don't have to do all of this at once. Starting with 100 pounds of grain on a single Saturday is not the goal and not necessary. You can start with a jar of ghee and a bag of lentils on your next regular grocery run. Add bouillon and potato flakes the following week. Pick up sardines when they go on sale. Add a box of peanut butter powder and a couple of bars of dark chocolate. Over the course of 4 to 6 weeks, without dramatically changing your spending, you will have assembled the functional foundation of a food supply capable of carrying your household through a genuine disruption. Small steps taken with consistency. That is the entire strategy. There is nothing more complex required. Preparedness isn't driven by fear. It's built from a very specific kind of quiet confidence. The confidence that comes from knowing you've actually addressed the basics instead of just thinking about it. That feeling is different from anxiety. It's the opposite of it. If this breakdown was useful and you want to keep building on it, please give this video a like. It genuinely helps this content reach other people who would find it valuable, and it tells my channel, that this kind of practical, detailed, no-hype breakdown is worth continuing to produce. If you have a food that belongs on this list, something from your own experience that you've found works well and holds up in real disruptions, drop it in the comments. I read them all. Some of the most useful additions to my own storage plan have come directly from what viewers share. You don't need a perfect plan. You don't need a large budget. You don't need prior experience. You just need to take the first step.